Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's Rocket League EU Power Rankings show, where I will reveal to you the top 10 teams in Europe for this week. Hello everybody, my name is Shalthis. I am, of course, part of the EU Power Rankings Committee and the host of this wonderful little program. So, I don't know if the power rankings have been posted yet. So this might be more of a recap, or more of a reveal, and less of a recap than it usually is. So, I'm sure you're all excited to find out who the top 10 teams are. Of course, this week's been a little bit different. Rocket Royale did not run this week due to kind of reevaluation of things and stuff's going on. More updates on that, or the update on that, the big update, which is why it's been taking so long, should be coming this weekend. So stay tuned for that. We'll hopefully have more then. But for now, I think it's time we get into our power rankings. Again, the top 10 teams of Europe based off their performance this past week, as well as their performance kind of in recent weeks. You know, we look at more than just 1 week. The week helps us adjust, but it doesn't dictate the entire ranking. So, in case anybody's curious, what we do here with these Rocket League power rankings is every week, myself, Doomsy from Team Rocket, and Cloudfuel, the owner of Rocket League Central and the coordinator behind Rocket Royale and everything, we all get together every week, after Sunday, either after Rocket Royale or after ESL, whichever happens first or last, and we determine the performance of every team in Europe over that week. Sometimes we get brand new teams on the radar, sometimes we get the same sort of picture. But not a whole lot of change this week, I will start off by saying. Without Rocket Royale, we haven't had a lot of that high-level play in EU. Many of the top-tier teams either didn't play this week or only played in a little bit, so we didn't get that exact kind of direct competition that we like, and that's what we get out of Rocket Royale. But in any event, let's get things started, shall we? Starting at number 10, Smokin' Rockets. So Smokin' Rockets had the bottom spot last week as well. And as far as Smokin' Rockets goes, when they were being approached, and this is something that Cloudfuel acknowledged and I acknowledged too, going into this week I wasn't sure where they were going to place. But following Gfinity, they actually had a really solid Gfinity run. They finished second place, only losing to SK Gaming, which, when we're looking at this sort of stuff, you know, it's hard for me to say, like, what determines a team's ranking. You know, I've tried to explain it a little bit, but a lot of it can be subjective. We tried to take actual measurable metrics, such as direct wins and losses, overall performance, how they compare against teams that are ranked above them and below them, and then try to break it down from there. But there's a lot of little factors that can go into it too. Now in this particular case, Smokin' Rockets had a clean run through Gfinity straight to the final. Now they didn't beat SK Gaming, but that was to be expected. Because again, we expect that teams ranked above other teams to be able to beat the teams below them. Most of the time. You know, that's not going to be a guarantee, but most of the time we expect that. So Smokin' Rockets losing to SK Gaming was not a huge surprise, but it was a good performance for them to go all the way through the tournament without dropping a single game until the final. So, good on them to get through that. So, at this point though, I will say there's a lot of flux going on in the EU side, and there's a lot of new teams that are starting to creep in. So Smokin' Rockets really has to get more consistent with these quality wins, not just in Gfinity, but also ESL, and hopefully in Rocket Royale, and try to make a little more notable presence for themselves. So we'll see how that changes over the course of this week, and then we'll come back and go from there. But so far, Smokin' Rockets in at number 10, so not too bad. Number 9, Team Rocket. Now, I want to take a moment to kind of talk about Team Rocket, because as many of you may know, maybe you don't know, Team Rocket, as we know it, has disbanded. Noir and I Am a Tree are no longer part of Team Rocket, so they are now huge, viable free agents for any European team looking to get some dynamite playmakers and effective strikers on their team. Noir and Tree are huge. Now, if they're going to keep playing, maybe they'll stick together and bring on a third for a brand new team. I don't know. I'm not sure what their future holds. But as far as Team Rocket goes, they are changing their approach to Rocket League. Less strictly competitive, more fun, casual, and we'll still play tournaments and we'll still try to win, but we're not going to do scrims or do all that, you know, other kind of pro-level stuff that you'd expect or require out of a top-tier pro team. Now this past week, of course, they didn't have much of a run, but then again, I don't think they had their full roster for a lot of this stuff. And as it stands right now, what Team Rocket will be doing is Cole and Doomsy will remain as a team and occasionally bring on a third, potentially Fisho, who also doesn't want to do the whole competitive thing. So they'll go back to their old formation and just have fun and focus on streaming on Team Rocket RL on Twitch and other things like that. Now, in my write-up for Team Rocket this week, I talked about how I owe a lot to Team Rocket, to be perfectly honest, and I do, so I want to talk about that for a minute. When I was first getting my start here, in terms of being a shoutcaster and personality in Rocket League, I was trying to get more involved with the more notable teams, because when I was starting casting, I was just sort of picking matches out of nowhere, and dealing with like YouTubers who really weren't big, but they were giving me footage that I could use. So that's how I got started. But then I was like, you know, I'd like to cast ESL. And I ended up talking with Team Rocket, specifically Doomsy, but Team Rocket in general, about, hey, can I just follow you guys through your ESL tournament runs? And that started with the Europe Cup number 3. And I followed them, I think, to the round of 32, and I think they ended up losing to, at that point, was Teamy Weemy, otherwise known as Flipside Tactics now. The next week, or not the next, yeah, it was the next week, I was going to do the same thing. But then they ended up losing to Supersonic Avengers in the first round, in the round of 128. And I was stuck. I was like, oh man, I wanted to do this tournament and hopefully do more. But thanks to my viewers, I was able to actually cast every game of the series all the way through to the final. And it was that tournament that got me noticed by ESL, which got me my first big break here in Rocket League shoutcasting to cast ESL events. Now I've moved on to do Rocket Royale and a variety of other things as they come up. But I do owe a lot to Team Rocket for giving me that one little chance to kind of show what I got. So I will always be supporting here somewhere. I'll always be supporting my my boys in Team Rocket in whatever they do here. So this will probably be their last appearance on the top 10, most likely, since they are stepping out of that super competitive side, and that's kind of what the top 10 is all about. So, all right, moving on. Number 8, My Zero. So Team Rocket's fall, that ended up boosting My Zero up on the rankings a little bit, as well as their performance this week. Now, they ended up placing third in ESL, which is a pretty big showing, and doing fairly well overall in terms of their overall performance here. So My Zero is still kind of on the cusp of really breaking through to the next level. And that's a big thing that we're trying to kind of wait and see on. I'm hoping that My Zero will ultimately figure out what their team formation is going to be and start pushing toward the middle point of this top 10 list. Start getting bigger wins, more consistent wins, and potentially being involved in something a little bit bigger. So that's what I'd like to see out of My Zero, but not too much out of them this week, unfortunately. Number 7, ... So, you know what? I forgot to actually update these with their movement on the power rankings too. So, tell you what I'll do. Because I know that that was something that was brought up to me, and I do want to mention that. Team Rocket moved down 3 points. My Zero, of course, moved up 1, and ... has also moved up 1. So, a little bit of movement there. Nothing too dramatic, but definitely a little bit of movement from these teams going into here. So, yeah, so as far as ... goes, let's talk about them a bit. So, ... has had a little bit of changes to their roster. They finally seem to have settled on something that is giving them some effective wins. They not only managed to log a win over Flipside Tactics, despite the fact that Flipside was playing with a sub, which does matter in the long run, but it's still a big win. They also forced a 5-game series against SK, and ended up splitting both a win and a loss with Spectral, the team that was ranked right above them, or actually was ranked number 4 last week. So as far as their performance has gone this week, it has been pretty solid overall. And ... certainly has earned their place here at the end, the number 7 spot. So, good showing on their part to move up a spot here. And I'm very interested to see, now that they've settled on a roster and are starting to get some big wins under their belt, how that's going to translate in the next week. With that momentum behind them, that can go a long way. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. But that is ... Number 6, Spectral. So Spectral has dropped 2 spots since last week, previously number 4. And a lot of this has to do with just, I'm beginning to think it's a number 4 curse. It seems that number 4 spot, teams get to it, and then don't hold it for very long. Many teams have been on that list. ... was number 4 before. Peace Hater, as you know, was in that spot. A lot of teams have been in that number 4 spot and then dropped, and they're trying to kind of edge back up there. Now, as far as Spectral goes, of course, they were number 4 last week. So, this really has to do with the types of losses they had this week. Of course, they split that series with ... which, based off of how the rankings should go, they should have won both those series. So splitting it shows a little bit of a change to things. They also lost to Kapow. And that, again, is another team that, based off the rankings, they should have beaten. So with all those things taken into account, it comes down to not a lot of significant wins and some more significant losses. So when you balance those two out, the fact that they have that edge in considerable losses versus considerable wins, it's enough to nudge them down a bit. But I've seen so much from Spectral that I've come to this point to understand that, that this isn't the end of the road for them. I don't think they're going to keep dropping on this power ranking. I expect them to hold around this point, around the 4 to 6 point seems to be where I think Spectral's going to hold for a little bit, unless they have some breakout week where they just start crushing teams. But I will say, cracking that top 3 is very difficult. And I'll talk about that when we get to number 3. But as it stands right now, we're only at number 6, so let's move on. Number 5, Kapow. So Kapow, as some of you may not know yet, was recently picked up by MyXMG. So brand new sponsor for Kapow, which is, I'm sure, will be a banner they will be rocking with this week. That's a big pickup for them. But Kapow has been a very formidable team. They're holding the same spot from last week, so no change there. But as far as Kapow goes, again, just a really dynamite performance out of them. They've been looking pretty good this week. Again, they got a big win over Spectral. They've beaten Torch this week. And the only thing that they ran into this week, which caused them a bit of a problem, is Peace Hater. Peace Hater ended up taking them out of ESL in the final, so Kapow did finish second in ESL. So I think for Kapow, crossing that hump is going to be their big thing. And with Peace Hater, that may not be such a daunting challenge. You know, I'm going to talk about them shortly, but as we know, Peace Hater has been inconsistent, to say the least. They've had a lot of major roster changes, of course, with Pashy joining the team and things like that. But for Kapow, getting past that consistently, I think, is key. I could expect Kapow and Peace Hater to kind of do this sort of thing on the rankings now and then. If you remember a long time ago, Team Rocket and the former Team Shazoo, now Noble Esports, were kind of considered those sister rival teams. They were always one spot above or below each other. This week, now it's starting to look a little bit more like Kapow and Peace Hater could be in that spot, but there's so much madness that goes on in the middle of the power rankings. Like the 5 through 7 spot, I'm sorry, I should say the 4 through 7 spot. Those 4 spots have a lot of flux, and teams will revolve in and out of that a lot. Like, I'm pretty sure every team in the 4 through 7 spot right now has been a former number 4. I don't remember if Kapow has, actually. But either way, most of them have. So you've got all that. And hitting my microphone here. So there's a lot to consider there in terms of just how much flux there is there and how quickly these teams can change around. But a good showing by Kapow this week to maintain their number 5 spot and keep going at least for another week. We'll see how they fare under the brand new MyXMG banner going into next week, and hopefully it'll be good things for them. Number 4, Peace Hater. Peace Hater has climbed 3 spots over last week, and a very big showing for them, mainly because it's showing signs of a recovery on their part. They didn't play in Gfinity, however, they did win ESL for the 2nd week in a row this time. Now with Peace Hater, they were in a very bad spot, over the last few weeks. As a lot of you know, they were losing pretty major series. They were dropping to teams they shouldn't have lost to. But they were getting big ESL wins. They won the monthly finals, they've been winning the regular weekly tournaments, and that does carry weight in terms of the teams that they have beaten. So it's been hard for them to refine their footing, but it seems like we're on the cusp of a Peace Hater resurgence. So this could be something, again, very big for Peace Hater now that they have figured their stuff out. They're in the right place. They've got that momentum going for them in the right direction. And depending on how things start to go when competition heats up next week, and in the weeks to go, it could be very interesting for Peace Hater to see if they can get back into that top 3. Well, I say back because I was referring to them as kind of swarm, but they've been in there before. They've had big weeks before. So in the meantime, they are going to be considered in that same conversation as the other 4 teams here. Like these 4 teams here. There we go. These guys here. Those are the ones that are really close to one another, and will probably be jumping around in those 4 spots quite a bit. So a good week for Peacehater moves them up significantly, and that takes us into our top 3. At number 3, Noble Esports, holding the same spot as last week. So Noble only had the 1 tournament showing in Gfinity this week, with a pretty smooth run, but ended up getting beaten by SK Gaming 3-0. So, with that, and with a 3-0 win over Galaxy Gaming Totality in the IRCL, the biggest problem for Noble, and the reason they didn't have any movement here, really has to do with the fact that they didn't do a whole lot. You know, that's the big problem, is they didn't really go far in here at all. And because of that, they don't really lose anything, because all of the other teams on this list have not had the same kind of results recently. But Noble didn't do anything to try and challenge for the number 2 or number 1 spots. They did lose, of course, to SK Gaming, which is not a huge surprise there, though I will say that the 3-0 loss is a little surprising. I'd expect that to be a bit closer, which kind of tells me that maybe the gap between 3 and 2 is a little bit wider than it used to be. You know, I always had Noble as that team that potentially could have dethroned the number 1, you know, and moved into that spot. But we've got time, you know. This week's been a really weird week. You know, without Rocket Royale, a lot of that high-end direct competition isn't there, so that's a big problem. But I don't think that, you know, I'm certainly not going to say that there's disaster ahead for Noble or anything like that, because I will say the gap between 3 and 4 is pretty wide. It's going to take Peacehater a lot of big wins to threaten that top 3. So Noble's got a pretty solid spot in that 3rd place right now. With the return of Rocket Royale, if they can get some big wins over SK, they can potentially bounce back and forth in the 1 and 2, in the 2 and 3 spots. Of course, though, I will say the battle between the top 3 is really close, because that number 1 spot is not as secure as it used to be. So now, moving on, number 2 on these power rankings, SK Gaming. Not a huge surprise there. SK Gaming had a big win in Gfinity, taking out Smokin' Rockets 4-0. And of course, like we said, taking out Noble as well. Basically just a series of big wins that we were expected to see, but nothing earth-shattering. Nothing they shouldn't have done. I guess that's the other thing here. So they did a good job of securing their number 2 spot, holding on to the same spot from last week, and proving that they are definitely one of the bigger and better teams in Europe and the harder teams to beat. So with SK right now, they are in the swarm spot right now. And what I mean by that is they are on the verge of being that number 1 team. And of course, the big dogs stand in their way. We know who they are. We know who number 1 is. I don't know why I'm delaying the inevitable, but they're on that cusp, you know? And it's all a matter of consistency, because it seems like with a lot of teams, and you can tell this for EU or NA, they do exceptionally well in beating practically every other team around them except for Flipside. And that's where the problem lies. And of course, number 1 is Flipside Tactics. Not a huge shocker there, I know. So what did Flipside do? Now the rankings listed at the bottom of the screen are not this week's, they are last week's rankings. You will see that they are different. So that's why they say last week's. But so what did Flipside do? So Flipside didn't do a lot this week, but the thing is that the other teams didn't do enough to upset them. You know, kicking Flipside out of number 1 is certainly going to take a lot more than just a week of moderately bad or a week off, effectively. The only things we saw out of Flipside this week is they operated as Perpetual Darkness or Perpetual Blackout, I think, is what the team name they used in Gfinity, which technically doesn't really count, but it was 2/3 of Flipside playing there without Kuxir, and they got ousted in the third round. They also lost to ... in the IRCL 3-0, but that was also with a sub involved. So it's not good for Flipside, I will say that much. These losses do factor. You know, they do factor into certain things. Were they big enough to drop them out of the #1 spot? Not really. Because, I mean, it was big enough in terms of the losses they had to threaten their #1 spot. So, because of that, you know, it does put them on notice. I guess that's the best word. It puts them on notice a little bit when it comes to that top 3. It gives a good opportunity for SK Gaming. It means that if SK has a really solid week next week, and I'm talking really solid, and Flipside doesn't do anything or has any big losses, we could see a change of guard in that top spot. But I'm definitely going to say that #1 spot is much closer to #2 than it used to be. So, I'm eager to see how that all plays out. I'm sure you all are as well. I'm sure a lot of you would love to see a change of the guard in Europe, but Flipside makes it hard. You know, they're definitely making it difficult to crack into there. But like NA, which has had a bit of a rotation there between you know, IBP Cosmic and Untethered, hopefully we'll start seeing that here in EU. Maybe a few weeks on or off for Flipside or SK, and you know, a little bit of that revolving door. But we'll find out what happens. So in any event, there is your top 10 for this week in Europe. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A, my favorite part of the week. So if you have any questions about Rocket League, about the European scene, about the power rankings, about the competitive scene, fire away. Let's do this thing. I always enjoy this part of the week because I get to answer some very interesting questions, and you get to know my insight, or at least my thoughts on specific things when they pertain to competitive Rocket League, which is really, it's what I do. I might stream a lot of other games, but I am entrenched in Rocket League. Well, for Noble, like, see, here's the thing with Noble, with you guys. A lot of teams that don't use their full lineup will use subs that aren't typically a part of their team, like random members of their team, or random players who either aren't signed to a team or are signed to different teams or whatever. Whereas Noble has that nice 5-person team, which is, you know, it's all you guys. And I know that your standard lineup is Stocky, Bogan, Skyline. And I know that that's the A team. And that's, of course, that's the team that I do a lot of influence when I actually do these rankings. I may not talk about it a lot when I'm writing things up or when I'm actually like talking about it here, but it does influence how I consider the rankings a bit. I know that, you know, when it's O'Neal or Meeps in there, it's a slightly different team, and they are technically subs, but they are still part of Noble. So there's a slight different look I have to give to it. Like, I would expect if you had Meeps and O'Neal in there versus 2 other random people, you would have a slightly better edge than a team using 2 random subs, so to say. There's a little more chemistry there in terms of the fact that you've all played together a lot, and have that there. I know that it's still a sub situation, so I consider it as much, but I have to weight it differently week to week, match to match, and I try to look at it a little bit better. I know I don't really bring it up a lot, but you know, it is a factor to consider. So when I talk about it here, it may sound like I'm applying equal weight, but I don't actually do it. Like, I know what the A team is, the standard front squad for Noble is, but it's a different dynamic that you guys have. I like what you guys do, though. You know, I've talked about this a lot, and I'll talk to everybody now. I think that what Noble does with a 5-person team, you know, 3 main roster, 2 subs, and a coach, honestly is, and I still feel this way, the future of Rocket League. Like, I expect pro teams to certainly rock at least 4 players on their main official signed roster, similar to what SK Gaming does. You know, a 3-man team is great, but without a dedicated sub or 2 who is loyal to your team and assigned to your team, it's going to get a little harder in the future. So I expect to see that, you know, 4 or 5-person teams with coaches becoming like the future of competitive Rocket League going forward. Yeah, and that's the problem, is sometimes like a 3-0 scoreline or a 3-0 series score isn't really indicative of the actual gameplay. So it gets a little, you have to dig into the individual games a little bit further. But again, you know, cracking into that number 2 spot is a little tricky, but you know, you didn't lose anything either. And your performance certainly wasn't loss worthy or anything like that. It wasn't worth losing any position on the rankings. So, still a good showing, you know, in that number 3 spot. Alright, let's see. What team should pick up Tree? It's getting hard because I don't know what teams have spots available anymore. But, the thing that I don't know, as well as a lot of other people do, is the actual team dynamic. You know, I know how teams play, and there's very obvious players that have certain reputations. Yemen and Pashy and DeBoer and stuff like that. They all have certain, you know, their own thing. But I don't know what the team chemistry is like, and I don't really know where Tree will fit in. You know, from a skill standpoint, I'd love him to join a team that's in this top conversation, a team like a Power Spectral or ... who has the potential to crack that top 4 and be a formidable team in Europe. I'd love for him to do that. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know if he and Noir are going to stick together, bring on a new third, and maybe be a brand new team that emerges into here. Tree can be a great addition to any team, perfectly honest with you. He is a tremendous playmaker, a great striker, and one of the things that I always notice about him is his ability to get very solid clears. That is a great skill to have. He can approach a ball from practically any angle and put it exactly where it needs to out of harm's way most of the time. So that is very, you know, a really impressive thing on his part. So I think he could be a good addition to any team, really. He's that playmaker role, so he fits in whenever you need him. Who would be the best third for not? I don't know, because my NA knowledge is really terrible. So I can't say for sure. That's a very hard question for me to answer. I am not a part of ESL. I just work with ESL. And I have no control over the length of Sunday's tournament. Here's the thing with the Sunday tournaments, though. Let me explain this part at least. The Go4 Cups are not pro-level tournaments. At least they're not designed to be. The Go4 Cups, across all of their different games, not just Rocket League, but all of their different games, are basically considered competitive open tournaments. Which means any player, any team, if they want to play a competitive tournament, can sign up for a Go4 Cup. Now, I know that the problem is, for a lot of people, is that, especially when you're on a pro team, you're having to go through a lot of teams that you can typically relatively easily beat, and it makes it hard to shift your playstyle to a more competitive style when you start meeting the real, like, pro teams, the threatening teams, the teams that give you problems. And plus it goes for a very, very long time for very little prize. But here's the thing, that's what the Go 4 Cups are for, is for players who aren't pro level, but can crack into doing something competitive and potentially win prizes. Unfortunately, right now, the reason that you have to play in things like ESL is because there's nothing else. There aren't any other pro-level tournaments yet. You know, especially without Rocket Royale being around, it makes it even harder. But Rocket Royale will, and other companies, as they start to get into bigger Rocket League tournaments, you're going to start to see opportunities for those pro teams to do more in there. But for now, there's not really much that can be done as far as ESL goes, because that's just the nature of that tournament. It's not really for pro players, it's just a competitive open tournament. And when you put the words open and competitive in the same tournament, that means you're going to get hundreds of teams that sign up, which means you're going to get a 5, 6, 7 hour tournament. And there's not much you can do about it, unfortunately. Alright, let's see. Yeah, there is an ESL Play survey that's up right now. If you have thoughts about ESL, if you don't like the length of the tournament, fill that out. You also get a €5 certificate to use on ESL Store. So if you want to pick up some sick duds, then do that. Alright, tell you what, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to think of some more questions. I am also going to turn to Twitter and see if anybody on Twitter has any questions. Alright, I'm going to try and solicit questions from Twitter. And let's check in on the chat again while I'm waiting for feedback on that. What's my opinion on non-standard maps for competitive play? Depends on the map. I know that the only non-standard map right now is Wasteland. That map is not so radically different that I think it could be a very viable addition to the map pool. You know, I think we're reaching a point where we should introduce more of the map pool into play and allow teams to either choose where they want to go or have this random selection of certain maps. Obviously, some maps probably won't be good for the game, but they have allowed you to turn weather on and off, so I guess that's not a big deal anymore. But yeah, I could certainly see Wasteland being a map that's viable in the competitive pool, but it all depends on the map itself. If it's too radically different, then no. But something like Wasteland, it's just wider, boosts are in different spots, and it's got that little bit of a taper on each side. That's not a big deal. That can certainly be done. Pro players should have no problem there. So I expect that, yeah, Wasteland would be good. And I'd like to see some different ones, so as more maps evolve and things add on, I think that'd be good. Could any NA teams consistently compete with EU, not including Cosmic? Absolutely. Kings of Urban has done it. They finished in the top 4 in Rocket Royale during the last week of it. As Nexus, the former Untethered team, as they kind of find their footing again, they're another NA team that absolutely can do some damage. That's in the top of the list. Now, if you get a little further down, teams like Not can be very competitive in there. Orange Creamsicle, another very competitive team that can do some damage, and they just got Gambit on their squad, so that's a huge addition for them. Yeah, there's plenty of viable NA teams that can certainly do some consistent damage to EU. It's just very hard because some of these EU teams are really, really, really high up there, and Cosmic's one of the few teams that can really compete at that level. Yeah, I do think that if a map is too different, or too... Like, here's an example. I don't think that Galleon, if they add Galleon to the map pool, will ever be a competitive map. It is too radically different, with far too many vastly different elements, and it completely modifies the playstyle you have to play with. Those are fun maps. You could have fun tournaments with those maps involved in it, but from an actual competitive side, it's just too radically different. There's no way. You know, the thing when it comes to competitive maps is that, and this applies to any esport, they have to be able to be played using the same skill set, maybe slightly modified. And that's where Wasteland comes in. Like Wasteland, you can play Wasteland like you play any other map, but you have to slightly adjust how you play it due to the flow of the map, due to the size of it, where the boosts are. So you have to make a few little adjustments, but it's not such a radical change as something like Galleon would be, you know? Because that's a big difference. But yeah, I think something that has a little bit of an adjustment would be good. Any new teams that got my attention last week? Not sure about new teams. I will say that my team to watch this week was the Three Musketeers. They had a pretty impressive showing this week, getting some pretty big wins and threatening some other teams. So they are one of my teams to watch. And I will say, just to make sure y'all know, so the rest of the rankings this week that aren't in the top 10. Number 11 was Galaxy Gaming Immortals, who had a pretty solid week this week. Teamus Weemus came in at number 12. The Three Musketeers came in at number 13. Torched coming in at number 14. And Bag of Miracles holding on to the number 15 spot due to their performance. So those 5 teams round out the top 15, which is kind of how we rank things. Believe me, though, the final 15, like those final 5 spots, are way closer than it seems. So that's tricky stuff. The teams to watch are going through on the ticker here, but I will say, like, myself and Cloudfield are both watching Three Musketeers, and Doomsy has his team to watch as SRPBC, or SARPBC Remaster, please, is his team to watch. So that is what we got. Yeah, Morbo, you know, I don't think anybody has ever taken anything away from Gambit's skill at all. That's one of the drawing factors he has. The guy is a very skilled player. Just personality-wise, you know, he certainly didn't do himself any favors with the move he pulled on Kings of Urban. Just put that much. And he hadn't exactly had the best reputation coming into Rocket League with his thoughts on the game, and still playing it anyway. But, you know, it's all business, you know? You gotta get skilled players, and Gambit just happens to be a very skilled player. And that's never really been up for debate, I don't think. Alright, let me peek in on Twitter. Still nothing yet. So I'll give that a little bit of a moment. Ah, Kings of Urban and Gambit. Oh, you don't know this story. Okay. I'll tell this story, because it's a very interesting thing. During Rocket Royale, the last week that Gambit played with Kings of Urban, he had decided in the middle of the tournament, I think in the middle of like the lower bracket, that he was going to take a break from competitive Rocket League. He told his team as much, and was prepared to leave in the middle of a series, but they allowed him, they really compelled him to stay throughout the series at least. And then they had to bring in Waffles to finish up the tournament with. So he left Kings of Urban in the middle of a tournament with the idea that he was taking a break from competitive play. The week later, he signs with Swarm and becomes part of Swarm's team, and they release Stocky, who then goes on to Noble Esports. I don't know why they decided to get rid of Stocky, but it happened. So, instead of actually taking a break, he just decided to bail on Kings of Urban, signed with Swarm, that was a disaster, and his version of Swarm went nowhere. So Pashy, DeBoer, and Gambit really didn't do much of anything considerable. And ultimately that team disbanded, and Swarm has dropped their Rocket League team. So that's the story of what happened there. It's not a whole lot, but that's what happened. Where do I see the biggest gap in terms of skill between the teams in the top 10? There's not a lot of big gaps. I'm going to tell you that much right now. There really isn't. I would say the biggest gap would have to be between 3 and 4. It's not a huge gap, but it's definitely considerable. Like, right now, the top 3, Noble, SK, and Flipside, kind of have a lock on those spots. Like, teams would have to do some pretty big victories to crack into that top 3. That's where I'd say the biggest gap is. At least in terms of just the two teams that are next to one another, obviously. But it's a pretty smooth increase from 10 to 1, you know, aside from 3 and 4. There's a little bit of a gap there. But yeah, that's where I'd say it is right now. Wasteland you can only play on private servers right now or in your own private games because it's not available as a ranked or ladder map yet. But let Psyonix know and maybe they'll make that change in a future patch or update to allow you to play Wasteland on the ladder or, you know, just somewhere else. Alright, will there be any big play features getting added to RR? Can you clarify that a little bit? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Oh, is it in the unranked ladder? I don't know if it was. Alright. Good to know. So it is in the unranked ladder, just not in the ranked ladder. I knew it wasn't in the ranked ladder. I didn't know that they had it in there. Will Wasteland be featured in Rocket Royale? Maybe. It's something we're discussing. I think we can do it. Like I said, Wasteland is a good, viable map for that. Oh, like a top plays video? That's possible. We would probably see if we can work with the Rocket League Cinema guys, since we're all kind of part of the same little family, and maybe do something like that for Rocket Royale. That is certainly a good idea. I will filter that to the other guys and see what they think, for sure. But yeah, I mean, as for Wasteland, I could certainly see us using that in competitive play. Like I said, it's not such a dramatically different map that competitive play is not possible. So, yeah, I could absolutely see that being used. What do I think about very young players? Doesn't matter to me. I think if you're capable of playing the game, by all means, play it. It's a great game. Any age. I don't care how young or old you are. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Wasteland is that there's not a lot of huge differences there. You know, it was actually less radically different than I expected it to be. You're still capable of hitting the same sort of shots. The only thing you have to be considerate about is the way the ball bounces off of the angled sides of the field. So it adds a slight difference, which is good, but it's not a dramatic difference. So I think players can really adjust to that. I am still kind of figuring out how I want to do my weekly streams. I'm probably going to just ditch the whole idea of doing a weekly streaming schedule and just stream, like what I mean by that is, instead of doing specific things every day, I'm probably just going to stream every day at 3. So. Wasteland is different, but it's not dramatically different. what I mean by that is, like, it doesn't require a completely new skill set to play on. You know, it's not that far different, and that's why I say it could be a good addition to competitive, because players will still need to adjust how they approach the map, and they still have to play differently, but they don't have to have a completely new idea of how to play the game in order to do it. You know, it's not like the map is only 2 feet wide and 1,000 feet long, you know? It's just a slight adjustment with some big changes, but they're easy to adapt to, I guess I should say. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Wasteland requires a lot of specific practice, you know, necessarily. And just having your general experience in Rocket League will go a lot further than specific Wasteland-only experience. So I'm hoping Psyonix does add it to the ranked map pool. I think it would be a good way to kind of make things interesting. So... But yeah, as far as my weekly stream schedule goes, yeah, like I said, I think instead of just having a specific thing that I'm going to do every day, because the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I don't want to be forced to do something every day. I just want to do what I want to do, and when I stream, I don't always stream Rocket League stuff. You know, I play Paladins, I play Counter-Strike. I'm starting to do that a lot more, and I like to do that with other people around to talk to. So... But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do that and make that a factor in Rocket Royale. Maybe we'll see it a little bit more on the ranked servers or competitive scenes in other areas, but for now, no idea. What is this? This is the Rocket League EU Power Rankings show. You've come in a little bit late. We've already done our power rankings. As you can see, these are the top 10... No, this way. These are the top 10 best teams in Europe, based off their performance this week as well as the past few weeks. And when we're done here, feel free to watch the VOD if you want to find out more about these teams and what the deal is. Will there be hockey tourneys? I know of at least one. For many of you who don't know, I can actually talk about this a little bit more, though there's still a lot of details that aren't final yet. Coming... hopefully soon, there will be the Rocket League Winter Classic. It's going to be an 8-team double elimination charity tournament, all in Snow Day, which is the hockey mutator. So it'll be best of, I'm not sure what I think best of 5. I don't know yet. I haven't figured that part out. But it's going to be the Rocket League, not Rocket Royale, Rocket League Winter Classic. It's going to be just hockey games played on the hockey mutator. 8 of the best teams in the world that are willing to play, taking on each other in a double elimination tournament. And again, it's all going to be for charity when that happens. A lot of those specifics are still being worked out. I can tell you, there are big ideas happening right now, and big conversations around this tournament that are happening. I don't have anything final yet, though. But if it all works out, you can expect really, really big things. I can say one thing. The amazingly wonderful, wonderful people that are a part of Rocket League Central, the team that I'm also a part of, are going to be helping produce and admin this tournament. So that is going to be very, very cool on their part. But yeah, we are going to be trying to get a lot of donations. We're going to be trying to, you know, do things well. I don't know specifically what the charity will be yet, but I have ideas. I'm trying to go for a good international charity. Right now, top of that list is Doctors Without Borders, but it all depends on if they say it's okay. And before I approach them, I want to make sure I have some details on hand, which I don't really have right now. So, stay tuned for that. If you want to find out more about that tournament and you have Twitter, it is twitter.com/RLWinterClassic. Go to that Twitter page. That's the Twitter account for the Rocket League Winter Classic. Any new information will go through there. It'll also go through my Twitter account, which is twitter.com/Shalthis. So all that stuff will come. And of course, Rocket League Central will, I'm sure, make note of all that good stuff as well when it happens. So Stay tuned for that. Bass, my friend, thank you for the subscription. New Shao pal. Very nice. Awesome stuff. But yeah, as far as other hockey tournaments go, maybe. I'm sure other companies may want to, or other entities may want to get involved in that. But yeah, I've had plans to do the Winter Classic ever since Hockey Mode was announced. Basically, that was the first thing I wanted to do. Was do a hockey-themed tournament. And I had actually been working on a charity tournament for even longer than that. So I figured, let's tie them both together. We'll do a charity-based hockey tournament. So that'll be in the Snow Day Mutator every game. Yeah, Doctors Without Borders is good for that. So that's why I wanted to go with them. So we'll see if they're open to it when I have a little more information on hand. But yeah, I've got big plans for this particular tournament. So I'm hoping it works out. Alright, I'm peeking on Twitter again. It doesn't look like I'm getting any questions from Twitter. Yeah, it was all due to a glitch of sorts. No need to explain, it's just, there you go, they're all there. Anyway. Alright, one more call for questions, and then I think we're going to wrap up this week's show. So, if there are any further questions you have about Rocket League, about gaming in general, or just anything you feel like asking me, now is a good time to do it. Of course, if your questions are about NA Rocket League, that's going to be a little harder. Why eggs? Those are the fans. All the fans in Rocket League, all the little eggs that plan the stadium, that are in the stadium seats, they're eggs. You would know that if you watch me. I talk about those eggs all the time. Look at these eggs. So I had to make an emote. They're not balloons, they're eggs. Let me just put that one right out there. They're definitely little eggs in attendance. But I mean, they're not officially anything. I just call them eggs because they're eggs. I just call them eggs. That's it. That's all it's about. No, of course, no hate. You subscribed. I can't hate you. I'm legally obligated to not hate you. All right. Last call. Any kind of questions you want to ask me before we wrap things up here, now is the time. Do so at this point. Twitter is not being helpful at all, so just plug it right into the chat. Let me know anything you want to know about Rocket League, about the power rankings, about the scene itself, or just anything. If you just want to find out something about me or ask my opinion on something, do it. Do it. Because if there's nothing left, I'm gonna wrap things up here. When will I have kids? I don't get to decide that. I can try as much as I want. It all depends on when it happens. When is the next Rocket Royale? There will be information about that this weekend. So stay tuned. This weekend we should have some new information about what the future is going to be for Rocket Royale. It's good stuff. It's exciting stuff. So I can't say anything yet. Just stay tuned for that announcement. It's going to be on live stream, so you'll be able to tune in, check that out. You can also watch the VOD, and just keep an eye on Twitter and stuff like that. So it'll be all over the place as far as what the future is for Rocket Royale. But a lot of cool stuff. Have I watched the Gibbs Game Show? I was a part of it. I was a part of the very first season of the Gibbs Game Show. If you go back and watch the first 3 episodes, I was a part of that. So yeah, the Gibbs Game Show was fun. Maybe I'll do it again sometime. No babies with rabies. Good call. Hey, DeBoer. How you doing, my friend? I wasn't sure what that emote was for a second there. It's a little green thing. I was. Felt very confident in my abilities, even after I had already lost. It was fun. It really was. I'm terrible at Rocket League, so I clearly wound up where I belonged, but I had a good time. Alright, well, let me ask you all a question. I know you're all here because you're fans of Rocket League and you like what I do for Rocket League. Well, I guess I'm not really going to ask you a question. I just want to tell you about it. I'm going to be playing a lot more Counter-Strike on this channel because I'm just having fun playing it. So if you want to watch that, you know, follow so you'll know when I go live, or watch me on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll also see when I go live here. But yeah, you know, if you want to watch that stuff, that's what I'll be doing quite a bit. I also play the game Paladins. I just got beta access to that, so I've been playing that a lot more as well. But I don't play a ton of just regular Rocket League anymore because I'm like, I enjoy it for fun, but I'm really bad at it. So I enjoy doing it, you know, when I can. Yeah, I mean, if I get enough viewers for Counter-Strike, I'd definitely do viewer games with Counter-Strike. I'm sure I just like party up or something like that. I don't even know. I've had the game for less than a week now. I still am barely decent at it. Not even decent. I'm just barely manageable. Anyway, all right. Well, I'm gonna wrap up this stream here and this show because it seems like we are good. One last check on the Twitter. Nope, I don't see anything. Cool. Yeah, me too. I literally just got it during the Steam sale. That's why I got it, because it was half off. All right, folks. Well, thank you all for being a part of this week's Power Ranking show. I'll be back next week to do it all over again, and hopefully we can talk about what the updates are for Rocket Royale at that point, since hopefully they'll have been revealed. But in any event, thank you all very much for watching. I will be back next week for the next Power Ranking show, and I'll also be doing more streaming throughout this week just of stuff. Whatever. So, don't miss it. Thank you all again. I will see you next time.